Hidden amongst the trees upon this dry hill is a monument to a world and a people who have long since faded into myth and legend. These colorful and sometimes grotesque sculptures, along with a Boot Hill cemetery, were the creation of John Ehn, better known as the Old Trapper, or just plain OT for short. Through his unique brand of folk art, he preserved the spirit of a bygone era the way nobody else ever has. Come walk with me along this dusty trail into the mind and imagination of the Old Trapper. These concrete and plaster curiosities once graced the courtyard of a motel and roadside attraction called the Old Trapper's Lodge in Sun Valley, California. It was owned by John Ehn, a genuine old trapper who went by the initials OT. He was a well-known eccentric even before he took up sculpting. He sported an earring, dressed in Western garb, and had long snow-white hair and a goatee, well before they were considered fashionable. He was also known for the yarns he spun about his days on the trap line deep in the wilderness. Supposedly, he never told the same story the same way twice. Ehn's life as a folk artist didn't begin until he was middle-aged. In the early 1950s, he became acquainted with Claude Bell, the sculptor of the whimsical Western characters displayed at the ghost town at the Knott's Berry Farm amusement park. Inspired by what he saw, OT commissioned Bell to make a statue of him as a frontiersman that would welcome guests to his lodge. After a few days watching the artist work, OT believed he knew enough to make his own creations. In a 1976 interview, OT claimed that the sculptures were something he carried in the back of his mind his whole life. He said, "It was what I had to do to express my feelings. I feel at home here, like I never left the woods." John Ehn's story began on September 15, 1897, when he was born in a logging camp on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He was the middle child of 7 siblings of Swedish and Finnish immigrants. He left school in the 7th grade so he could work in his family's lumber and fishing businesses. As a sideline, he began trapping animals for the fur trade. For a time, OT and his brother Joel hunted alligators down in the Florida Everglades. Their partner was a surly ex-con named Snake Johnson, who often boasted about the men he killed. The Ehn brothers did well selling alligator hides, but they soon quit the business when they believed that Snake Johnson had murderous intentions on them. At the age of 23, OT married Mary Esther Gagnon. Their early life together was a hard one, spent traveling between lumber and fishing camps. Eventually, they would have 4 children together. Because of his trapping experience, OT became a game warden for the state of Michigan before being employed by the Federal Bureau of Biological Survey, the forerunner to the Fish and Wildlife Service of the Department of the Interior. His work often required him to take extended trips across the country to trap wild animals that posed a threat to the population and livestock. In 1940, a back injury forced OT to retire from trapping. To ease his back pain, his doctor advised that he leave Michigan for someplace warm and dry. Gathering up his family, OT relocated to the more salubrious climate of Southern California. There he bought land adjacent to the Burbank Airport, where he built the Old Trapper's Lodge. The map in front of John Ehn's statue gives a fanciful account of his travels across North America up to this period. Those experiences, along with healthy doses of Western folklore, would provide the backstory for his creative offspring. And though many of them are dark and considered risque by today's morals, they all echo their creator's sentimentality and sense of humor. In the clearing up ahead, a great battle is taking place between two bloodthirsty enemies, Pegleg Smith and Big Bear. Their discarded belongings are strewn at their feet and will become the spoils for the victor. Emerging from the platform on which they stand are faces that seem to be expressing a mixture of horror and delight over what is taking place above their heads. No one knows for sure what started the fight, but this fearsome pair of mighty Americans have been going at it for decades with no sign of stopping. Only steps away, we come upon another dramatic scene called Kidnap. Here, a scantily clad young lady is being carried off as an unwilling bride. But as the kidnapper makes off with his fair maid, he pays the cost of one eyeball. O.T.'s love for the strange and unusual wasn't limited only to human figures. This toothy tortoise was most likely inspired by one he encountered in the Everglades. Here, tucked away almost out of sight, is what looks like a colorful pile of rocks. But upon closer inspection, we see that it is a pen containing deadly baby rattlers. The joke was that it was literally filled with baby rattles. Today, however, the joke is lost because it is filled only with dried leaves and garbage. O.T. often enlisted the help of his family in his creations. In a 1983 interview, his youngest daughter, Rosemarie, recalled his process for making molds of the faces. He put breathing tubes in our noses, she said, and poured plaster of Paris over our faces, and we would have to sit very still until it set. Rosemarie served as the model for the pistol-packin' two-gun Rosie. If you look close, you'll see where she keeps her shooting irons. Two-Gun Rosie shares a bench with a minor 49er, who has with him all the accoutrements he'll need to go excavating for a mine. Standing beside the minor 49er is his barefoot daughter, Clementine. If you're curious, she wears a number 9. Oh, my darling, her left arm is lost and gone forever. Dreadful sorry, Clementine. Sitting across from this prospecting trio are two well-dressed young ladies. Wearing red shoes and a blue dress, we have lovely Louise. Beside her in yellow is the bejeweled, sweet Lorraine. Together they sit, peering off in different directions, perhaps waiting upon the return of a long-lost beau. Could this handsome devil be the one who lovely Louise and sweet Lorraine are looking for? He is Lonesome George, who looks like he spent too much time in the wilderness. Although he's a bit dog-eared, people do say he's quite a catch. Of all the old trapper's creations, it is perhaps his bogus Boot Hill Cemetery that is the most famous. Here are tombstones made from concrete or stone, or planks of wood, that memorialize the dubiously departed. Each one tells the ironic and sometimes humorous story of how its owner met his or her unfortunate demise. And ill-fated little Nell, they told her not to go out in that blizzard. There is Indian Scout Harry Hoffman. Part Cherokee himself, he killed the great chief Bloody Hand before meeting his own end at the Gut River Massacre of '92. Unfortunate Red Finn choked to death on a piece of cork floating in a jug of gin. Loverboy Roy was killed for philandering. Rotgut Riley succumbed after drinking his own homemade swill. Sweet Celia was silly and frilly and died from having too much fun. Not a bad way to go, I suppose. Bill Boozer was the fastest drunk in the West. It no doubt brought him to an early grave. And luckless Lester Moore got 2 slugs from a .44, no less, no more. Some might argue he was asking for it. There's Buckshot Bailey, who got 6 bullets for teasing. Outlaw Flash Ferguson was the fastest gun in the West, who said he'd never be taken alive. He wasn't. Deadbeat Dan tried to skip out on paying his rent. Now he's a permanent resident. Pegleg Lily Larson was the pride of the Pecos until she ran afoul of jealous Bad Bill. Judge Hiram Blood brought law and order west of the Powder River. He reminded the 86 men and 3 lady outlaws he strung up that he was not to blame for their fate. It was the law. As we wander the graveyard, we find a body lying in state. The words on his tombstone are nearly faded away, but they tell us, "Here lies Bigfoot Brown. Dirty Gertie shot him down. Shake his hand, girls, he ain't been dead long." Among the more prominent of the ersatz tombstones belonged to Gundy Schutz, who, as his name and the arsenal on display suggests, was a gunsmith. Then there is Ironfoot Ava, a 300-pound giantess, poetess, singer, and blacksmith who was killed on her wedding day by persons unknown. Then there is the lovely and exotic Frisco Beauty, with the equally lovely name of Moonflower, who danced her way to Boot Hill. There is one last sculpture still to view, and here there is no irony or humor. It comes straight from the heart of the old trapper. Here stands a frontier woman with her 3 children, one still a babe in arms. They are alone in the wilderness fraught with dangers, and they stare out at who knows what, but there is no fear in their faces, only strength and determination. Ehn built this memorial to his mother and his wife, and to all pioneer women whose courage made it possible to settle the West. For more than 30 years, John Ehn ran his motel, sculpted his statues, and told tales about what may or may not have happened. Above all, he loved and cherished his family, and everything he built or made was for and about them. In 1981, the Old Trappers Lodge was declared a California Historical Landmark. In the same year, on the day after Christmas, John Ehn died at the age of 84. 4 months later, on what would have been their 61st wedding anniversary, his beloved wife Mary joined him in death. They were laid to rest in the Mausoleum of Remembrance at Valhalla Cemetery in North Hollywood. Under the management of his daughter Rosemary, the Old Trappers Lodge stayed in business. But after a few years, it was sold and demolished as part of an expansion project of the Burbank Airport. For a while, the future of Ehn's work was in doubt. The family worked with the nonprofit Spaces organization to find a new home for the sculptures. Eventually, they were moved to the campus of Pierce College in the San Fernando Valley and are available for the public to enjoy. Today, the figures are in serious need of preservation, but at least they still exist. And for as long as they do, a bit of John Ehn's spirit and a fragment of a time now forgotten will live on. Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy these stories and are interested in becoming a sponsor, please visit my Patreon page by clicking the link in the description. Even the smallest contribution will go a long way to creating more content. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel now for more grave explorations.